how do you define death? What words would you use around death? How would you give that language?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Like Christian heads wanting to say, people to say, oh, he's been promoted.
Okay.
But other times it's the end of something special. You know, at the end, when my dad died, regardless of what I now know about him, at the time when he died, I lost someone that had prayed for me for 3 hours. He prayed for all of us 3 hours a day. So I felt that loss. It was the end of that relationship, that community, that interaction, that engagement. So it was it was the end of something. Yeah, could not be recovered. With that contention of there'll be something nice in the future. So it's an interesting one. So yeah.
Okay. So if you're happy to, could you sort of share some of your experiences of death? Where have you encountered death? Only things that you're comfortable and happy to share, obviously. But where have you experienced death?
I experienced death when my dad died. He had been with living with a debilitating disease for years. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease when I was 2. So I'd always remembered him as a person with a disability, but he still had a zest for life. So when he got poorly and had his final lot of strokes, I didn't understand. He was like a completely different person. He was not the person I remembered. And so that had separation in my mind from reality, what I knew from what was happening. And it was almost like we were in a dream trying to talk to the medical professionals. This is not my dad. You're missing something. This is not my dad. He was parascending in COS 6 weeks before. Here's a photo. This is what he's like now. You can't say this is Parkinson's disease. Something has happened, and he weren't listening to us. So it was very difficult. And then when they finally did scans, they realized he had multi-infarct disease. He was having lots and lots and lots of strokes. Right. And so then we were having a battle with the hospital the whole time, how to look after him. So we had all that side of it, and it all happened and came to a head because they wouldn't let my mum stay past visiting time to help him go to the toilet with dignity. They sent her away. They gave him a catheter when he didn't want one. They scratched his urethra. He got an infection and died of septicemia.
Wow.
But if they'd waited 5 minutes holding the urine pot and let him do a wee, he probably would have died at some point because he wasn't well, but he wouldn't die the way he was, the way he did. So it was all very quick. And they moved him to another hospital, and we were then told that we wouldn't have to, we would have to make the decision whether to resuscitate him or not. We weren't ready for that decision because 6 weeks before, whatever weeks before, he was parascending in COS. We weren't ready. And he died in the early hours of January the 2nd, and we missed it because it was like 4 a.m. So that was really hard. We had to travel. I got a phone call. I had to wake up the others, knowing I think that he had died, because they'd said to me he wasn't responding to treatment, and I knew that meant he died. But I couldn't tell my sister that, and my brother. So we just drove 21 miles to Scarborough, tried to get into the hospital because it was all locked up. To then stand around his body again, and I couldn't see. It was like being in Madame Tussauds. That's not my dad. That's not the man parascending in COS. This is somebody from the waxwork. He just looks so different. And we were told, oh, he died peacefully in his sleep. And I'm thinking, no, he didn't. I know he didn't die peacefully in his sleep because he wasn't responding to treatment. You can see he didn't do, So we had all this contradictions, is what I'm trying to say. And that made my experience of death more of a shock and surreal, I think the word is, than I would ever imagined, really, because it just wasn't. I suppose in a way it's a bit like when people are going through it now, they don't understand what's happening because they were doing other things a few weeks ago, and now suddenly they get this random disease, you know, and they're not allowed to see their loved ones, you know, and they don't get to see them at the end. And it's all very, and the medical professionals aren't making sense of what they say. That, so I suppose I get an understanding about that. It's like that form of way. But then I was told, well, he was 70, he'd had a good innings, he's been promoted to glory. And 2 weeks later, I was working for Christian organisations saying to me, oh, can you help that person who's going through grief? You know, on the street when we were doing street evangelism, it was like, you know, they're saying, oh, Lucy's just lost her father, she could help you through this. I was like, no, I can't. No. I can't process this. It's too surreal. Who's supposed to be parascending in cos? You know, going back to that, it just didn't make sense. And so I went to the doctors thinking I was depressed, and I had a Christian doctor who said, no, Lucy, you're doing something called grieving. Have 2 weeks off. So I spoke to my boss and said I'd like to go away for 2 weeks. And he went, well, we've got this friends in Scotland who have a goose farm. Why don't you, that was Wes Urban, why don't you go there? Well, I've arranged it for you to go there. And I went, I don't want to go to Scotland. I want to go to my friends. What will you do? Cry? He went, that doesn't sound very healthy. I think it is. Yeah. So I went to my friends and I just spent 2 weeks sort of crying when I needed to, because I needed to be with somebody that knew my dad. Yeah. That knew that he'd been parascending in cos, that knew he'd been doing all his active things in spite of his disability, that knew the influence he'd had on my life, not with random strangers who I couldn't be vulnerable with. I felt the need to be vulnerable. I felt the need to be a little girl again, if that makes sense. So I was 26, an adult, but I felt the need. I felt like a child again. That's the only way of describing it. So I'm rambling on, but I hope that helps.
No, questions pop into my mind and then you answer them. It's brilliant. I think you use the word shock a lot because you know what you experienced, what you went through was like you say, it just turned, didn't it, from one, you know, it was this man doing what he was doing and you knew all that he was capable of and he was still living life to the full, and then within a matter of weeks that was all over, and nothing prepares you for that. And I think one of my questions is going to be, how did you process that? But you touched on the needing to be with friends, needing to be with someone that knew him, that could understand the journey you'd been on in those weeks, from knowing what he was capable of and what he was doing, and all of those conversations and frustrations with the medical profession, through to the very end, where even that was shrouded in confusion and contradiction, I think was the word you used. Someone that understood, you know, what you'd been through. So being with someone that knew you and knew your dad helped. What else would you say has helped you process that grief?
Life. I know it sounds strange, but I also did a course on cruise bereavement care because I'm qualified counsellor now, and I did 100 hours of helping people going through bereavement and supporting them. And they have this saying where you imagine there's a black dot like that size with a white circle around it, a very narrow white circle. I need to draw it really, and nearly the whole circle is the black dot. So all you see is the black dot. Then a few years later, the same size black dot, but the circle around it's wider. Okay. Doesn't mean a grief is any less. It doesn't mean a grief is any more processed. It just means the life's got bigger around it. So it's things that the sadness that you miss, your parent misses certain milestones, but life is the white circle area is just bigger.
That's awesome. That is a great analogy. That's really helpful.
I think it was done for people who have work with people who've lost a child, really. So it doesn't change. It's the black dot it's still there, exactly the same size. You still have those feelings. They never really go. You never fully process, I don't think, because you get triggers at different times. But life gets bigger. Of course, for me, in my case, and my dad, things have changed anyway. I've had to lose him all over again because of my new memories that have come back. you know, that he was not the man that I thought he was, that I blocked out. So I'm still processing that the man that I remembered growing up is not the whole man. So my dad was different. So I've had to go through a double bereavement. So sometimes I prefer the big white space rather than the black dot.
Yeah.
Because I don't have him with me. And then other times I concentrate on the black dot, and I think actually I do miss the man that did things like that. So, and I'm cross with myself because I remember all the other stuff. So yes.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is that grief isn't straightforward. That there are a number of different ways that you feel within that word that we call grief. Often a lot of people, do you need to,
no,
you're all right?
I was just leaving, sorry.
Often a lot of people just sort of say grief, sadness, you know, grief equates to just feeling sad. But I think the more we've talked to people, from my own experiences, you know, grief is so much more than just feeling sad. How would you define grief? What other, would you give it any other words?
It's questioning your identity. Because if you're grieving something you've missed, you're grieving something you lost that's part of you. That means there's a piece of your identity that doesn't feel right anymore. In the last 7 years, I've been grieving for the identity I thought I had, for the life I thought I had. And that's your framework. That's who you are. And if you've got someone in your life that's very close to you that's gone, you've got to try and refashion yourself without them. And that's just a humongous amount of work and the time that takes to even think about changing your identity, moving on with your identity and finding who you are without that person. And when you love that person completely, it makes it very difficult to recognize who you are anyway, because you lose yourself, you lose your identity sometimes with the person you love, don't you? You become that, you become woven, so you've got to try and fashion yourself. If the person that you've lost actually is not who you thought they were, then it's like, well, who was I anyway? So you're not lost your new identity. We don't know what your new identity is. You don't know what your past identity is. Because it was never what you thought it was.
Yeah.
So it's like your whole foundation is just torn apart from you. So
that's huge.
I just clung on to my faith that is the only identity I knew, is the only identity I recognized. Some people go away from God. For me, it was like, well, if I don't have him, I don't have anything. So I had to cling on to something, keep myself sane. And the more I did, the more I realized he hadn't changed. He was the one that hadn't changed. He was the constant. So it was everything else that changed around me. So okay,
so you've talked about your faith. You mentioned the word Christian. So we know, well, I know you have a Christian faith, and that has been a huge, well, the kind of the rock, the foundation of support. Who else and what else has been a support to you over the years? Where have you gone to for support and encouragement and direction, I suppose?
Interesting one. I'm quite reluctant to go to other people sometimes because I felt that I was often let down. People like to help you from a certain point to a certain level, but then they want to see the result of someone getting better.
Okay, yeah.
So that's quite difficult to do. So I did a counselling course, qualified as a counsellor, and that really helped me process lots of stuff about me. It's what brought lots of things out. But I finished the course and I did that, and that helped. And seeing little mini-me's and having little mini-me's around and parenting them has given me, people who say, well, you just think of yourself as a mum, and I think actually that's quite insulting. I thought to be a mum. It's a very proud achievement of mine, and that's really helped me. Also for me to see the horizon,
Yeah.
No matter how many storms there are in life, or in the sea, the horizon is always straight all around you. So I like to look to the horizon.
Wow.
And that is like my plumb line. And I live near horizon now. I can see the horizon outside our top bedroom window.
So good.
That's lovely. But also moving down the Isle of Wight, I used to think I would want to live on the side with a just complete horizon. But actually, seeing the gap between the mainland and here is good as well. I'm separate from my old identity. I can fashion, which is connected with loss. I can fashion a new identity as me, Lucy, the mum, Lucy who works at Aspire, Lucy the wife, Lucy, the churchgoer, the Christian, whatever, So, but I'm me here without the loss part. I've separated off from it, and that's helped too. So
yeah, no, that's fascinating. I love that the way you're using the visible, tangible evidence of nature, the world around you, and that actually death changes relationships, doesn't it? The dynamics change between people, and that is part of the grieving process, is learning how to be around people who are also grieving and have also been changed by the death experience too. It's a minefield. Is there anything else that you want to add or say on death to this conversation?
I think I've covered everything really. It's just that if you can cling to whatever rock that is for you, because I know not everybody shares the same faith as me or anything like that, and flow with the process, and know that there will be days that are just awful, there'll be weeks that are just awful, but the white part of the circle does get bigger. Grief doesn't change, but each day you wake up is a new day for that white area to get bigger. And if you can get through that, whichever rock you cling to, I think that's flipping amazing really, and everyone's very courageous. So yeah.
Awesome. Lucy, you've been an absolute star. I love that analogy. It's given me goosebumps, that analogy. It's so helpful, and so true. So yeah, thanks for that.